Can you tell me about the reports that the president was involved in the initial response that Donald Trump Jr. gave the New York Times?
So I read those reports as well, and the president did not draft the response. The response came from Donald Trump Jr., and I'm sure in consultation with his lawyer.
You were very careful to say the president didn't draft the statement. That isn't what I asked. Did the president get a heads up on the statement? Did he sign off on the statement? Was he asked to read the statement before it was given to the New York Times on Air Force One?
No, I mean, I can't say whether the president was told a statement was going to be coming from his son on that. I don't have that. I didn't have that conversation. And let me say this. The president, but I do want to be clear that the president was not involved in the drafting of the statement and did not issue the statement.
President Trump's attorney Jay Sekulow with an indirect answer to the president's role in his son's statement on the Russia meeting. Joining us from Washington, we have New York Times White House correspondent Glenn Thrush and columnist and deputy editorial page editor at The Washington Post, Ruth Marcus, whose latest piece on the president's legal team is posting today. David Ignatius and Elise Jordan still with us as well. Glenn, we'll start with you. The legal team is expanding. With who and why?
Well, they are. They've hired as a special counsel Ty Cobb, not the baseball player. I guess Honus Wagner was not available. Essentially because I think the determination from the conversations that I had last week in the White House was that Mark Kasowitz it just simply isn't capable of handling all of the material that he needs to handle. And there's been some dissatisfaction with his performance. The sense is that Kasowitz has been splitting his time between New York and Washington. That's not good enough. And the White House counsel, Don McGahn, has been asking for help for some time, and finally it was granted to him.
And, of course, you also have Kasowitz, Ruth Marcus, busy responding to emails late at night. You talk about Jay Sekulow and the legal team in your column today in the Washington Post. Tell us about it.
Well, I was just mesmerized by watching Sekulow perform what we've come to know as the full Ginsburg. I think this was his second full Ginsburg on the Sunday shows. And you watch him and you think, why is this man shouting? He's shouting, I think, because that's what Donald Trump likes. He wants somebody who isn't going to really answer the question, is going to deflect about Ukraine, is going to make these crazy assertions about if there was something wrong with the meeting. Why did the Secret Service let these Russians in anyway? This is just deflection. But what I think is really important to pay attention to with what Jay Sekulow said on Sunday is not why is he shouting, but what's he shouting. And you hear the hoofbeats of this attack on Mueller, that because the argument goes because James Comey leaked this information in order to get a special counsel, that somehow kind of taints the Mueller investigation, taints Mueller as special counsel. And so Sekulow suggests at one point, so I don't know how anything can proceed from there. Well, you know, just because somebody leaks information that a prosecutor then uses as a basis for doing the prosecution doesn't mean the prosecution can't go forward. This is a crazy argument, but it's an argument that you could completely imagine the president and his legal team using as an excuse either to fire Mueller or to grant pardons to everybody involved, and that really alarms me.
David Ignatius, of course, there have been a lot of people around Donald Trump saying there's no way that he can fire Mueller. But you listen to what Jay Sekulow says. Obviously, he's got to change his story every week. And yesterday, he couldn't answer the question, refused to refute the reporting that all the president's men on Air Force One drafted the statement the week before that was a lie about the meeting on adoptions, and that the president signed off on it. And he could not, he would not say that the president did not sign off on that false statement.
That was a very carefully worded statement by Sekulow. I want to come back to Ruth on this question of Robert Mueller. Ruth, do you have a sense that the White House is still thinking of firing Mueller? And what's your sense of what the reaction would be, both on the Hill to that and within the administration? Well,
I think that the White House is increasingly concerned about where this is heading. And I had thought we had seen the sort of get rid of Mueller or pardon issue kind of quiet down in the previous couple weeks. But the reason I decided to spend my Sunday writing that column was because Sekulow raised it yesterday. So I pay a lot of attention to these arguments as the kind of leading indicator of where things were going. I would have thought that, especially after, and I wrote this the other day, that these disclosures in the emails are so alarming that it would make Mueller more bulletproof and from being fired, that Republicans on the Hill would just erupt. But I have to say that the silence that Joe has noted among Republicans on Capitol Hill in the face of these emails, the silence has been so deafening that I begin to question my judgment there.
Glenn, Elise Jordan here. I believe it's been in your reporting that the president has not enjoyed it when his lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, has counseled him to cut out the tweeting. Do you think that Kasowitz is on the rocks? Does it seem likely that he would step down or that he would be fired anytime in the near future as this legal team continues to evolve?
I think he is joining Sean Spicer and Reince Priebus in that Netherland of aides who are still very much involved in decision-making, but are also not particularly in favor. Now, Kasowitz is obviously in a much different category. He's been privy to all of these discussions with Trump. But I think what's really interesting about Jay Sekulow and Kasowitz and everybody else associated with the legal team is they're doing less legal stuff than they are PR. We talked about what Jay was saying. Obviously, he didn't deny that Trump had seen the statement. And, you know, the notion that Donald Trump is going to see a statement and not be involved in the drafting, when this is a guy who's incredibly hands-on as his own press secretary, fundamentally. So what strikes me as being really interesting is Trump is still viewing this largely as a public relations problem as opposed to a legal problem. I think as the Mueller investigation moves up the road, David asked Ruth, is this fire Mueller movement still afoot? You know, Trump moves from day to day on this stuff. As Mueller gets closer to the investigation, as he calls more people in, as Trump becomes aware of Mueller's activities, I think it's going to be very hard for this president, who likes to fire people, you know, not necessarily on his staff, but fire people on the outside he views as hostile to him, to keep his finger off the trigger.
Yeah, and Glenn, I'm just wondering if, I mean, I'm looking at this report here, op-ed piece in the Washington Post, I guess, by two White House officials who talk about the CBO score, that it's going to be little more than fake news, using the president's language. And I know there's an investigation on one hand looking for breaking of the law, corruption. Right. But what about this sort of growing use of language that really chips away at the foundations of our reality and certainly of democracy? Not to sound extreme or to exaggerate, but these are comments that do that, do they not?
Well, Mika, I agree with you. I think this assault on the CBO is ridiculous. I think anyone who covers this stuff knows that the CBO scores are sometimes flawed, they're sometimes off by a lot. It's totally appropriate to criticize them, but to attack sort of the foundation of what they do. They're nonpartisan, they go about this in a rational way, they attempt to give Congress as much information as possible. I really do think that I completely agree with you focusing on that. I think this is a really alarming trend. And the other thing that's really interesting about this is, how many more tweets have we read from the president about golf tournaments at Bedminster than about Medicaid, which is the central issue that is being discussed on the Hill right now? He does not seem, for all of his yelling and screaming about this topic, he seems way less interested in what's going on in terms of the specifics of this health care debate than any of these other issues.
And that's certainly something that Republicans on the Hill and the Senate need to pay attention to. The president just wanted the House to pass whatever they could pass, David Ignatius. They passed it, and now he's calling that a mean bill. He's disengaged once again in the Senate process. And now his staff members are attacking the Congressional Budget Office. You and I have been in Washington long enough to know that's the last refuge of the desperate. But to attack them this way and to attack a CBO run by a director that they personally put in place is doubly offensive.
Joe, I think the more time passes, the clearer it is that the Republican slogan, repeal and replace, really has been a kind of placeholder because they don't have a clear idea about what kind of health care reform they want. And now they're hearing from governors, from health care professionals in every major state saying, please, please do not go off this cliff with this ill-considered bill. And I think the disturbing part is, as we've noted, the president just has not put his own attention into this, and he's not been able to mobilize resources within his own administration. So we're heading toward a decisive vote over the next couple of weeks. But this bill, any expert I talk to says this is not a well-considered bill.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.